The morning fog had barely lifted over Denver International Airport when something happened that no camera could fully capture and no announcement could explain. A young woman in faded scrubs stood at Gate 22, clutching a worn leather tote bag against her chest. Her eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that sleep alone couldn't cure, the kind built from years of quiet sacrifice. Her name badge read Maya Reeves, RN, but to the people rushing past her, she was invisible, just another tired woman in a crowded terminal. On the other side of the hall, a decorated U.S. Army colonel stood at attention, even in stillness. His chest bore ribbons of valor. His posture spoke of discipline. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, moved steadily across the crowd, trained to find what others missed. For a brief second, his gaze landed on the young nurse. She didn't wave. She didn't call out. Instead, slowly, deliberately, she pressed 3 fingers to the inside of her left wrist and held them there for exactly 2 seconds before dropping her hand. It was a gesture most people would never notice. A nervous habit, perhaps. A stretch, maybe. But the colonel's entire body went rigid. His jaw tightened, his eyes widened just barely before the soldier in him regained composure. He had not seen that signal in over 10 years, and he had taught it to only one person outside of combat. He scanned her face again. Older now, thinner, lines of worry where there had once been youthful fire. But it was her, he was certain. Within 15 minutes, in a quiet corner of the airport lounge, a conversation would begin that would change 3 lives forever. And at the center of it all was a story that started not in this airport, but in the wreckage of a wildfire in rural Montana more than a decade ago. If you believe in the power of one moment, stay with us. This story is for you. Maya Reeves grew up in Billings, Montana, the kind of place where winters were brutal and kindness was the only currency that never ran out. She was the eldest of 4 children raised by a single mother, Patricia, who worked as a school cafeteria cook. Their apartment was small, the walls thin, and the heating unreliable. But every night, Patricia made sure the children sat together for dinner, even if that dinner was just soup and bread. She used to say, "A family that eats together survives together." Maya took those words to heart. From childhood, she was drawn to caring for others. She bandaged stray dogs. She sat with elderly neighbors who had no visitors. At 16, she began volunteering at a rural clinic 20 miles from home, sometimes hitchhiking to get there because there was no bus route. The nurses there called her Little Doc, not because she was studying medicine yet, but because she had the instinct, the calm hands, the quieter voice that people in pain responded to. She applied to nursing school with nothing but dreams and determination. Her application essay read, "I am not applying because my life has been easy. I am applying because it hasn't, and I know what it means to need help." She was accepted on a partial scholarship. The rest she earned herself. Colonel James Whitfield, meanwhile, had spent 23 years serving his country across 5 deployments: Iraq, Afghanistan, the Horn of Africa, and 2 classified assignments he would never speak about publicly. He was known among his unit as the steady hand, the man who kept calm when everything else was falling apart. He had grown up in Phoenix, Arizona, the son of a school librarian and a mail carrier. Faith, community, and service had been drilled into him, not through commands, but through example. His mother always said, "The bravest thing a person can do is show up for someone they don't owe anything to." He had never forgotten that. Neither had Maya. But how their paths first crossed, that was the part that would make even the colonel's throat tighten, even now. It was the summer of 2013 when the Greystone wildfire tore through rural Montana with terrifying speed. Within 48 hours, it had destroyed over 12,000 acres, forced the evacuation of 4 small towns, and injured scores of residents. Maya was 17. She had gone with her clinic supervisor to assist at the emergency relief station set up inside a high school gymnasium 30 miles from the fire line. The gymnasium smelled of smoke and fear. Cots were lined in rows, children cried, old men sat in silence, staring at nothing. The official medical teams were overwhelmed. Supplies were limited, communication was breaking down. That's when a convoy of army vehicles arrived, a National Guard medical unit deployed to support civilian relief operations. Leading them was a young Captain James Whitfield, methodical and calm, issuing instructions in a low, steady voice that somehow cut through all the noise around him. Maya watched him work. She watched how he triaged patients without panic, how he spoke to scared children at eye level, how he delivered the most frightening updates with the most reassuring tone. During a brief lull, she approached him. "I'm not official medical staff," she said carefully, "but I can help. Tell me what to do." He studied her for a moment, this teenage girl with her sleeves rolled up and her eyes wide open. "Do you know basic wound care?" he asked. "Yes." "Pressure points?" "Yes." "What do you do when someone goes into shock?" She answered without hesitation, clearly and correctly. He nodded once and handed her a supply kit. "Station 3. Don't guess. If you're unsure, call for me." For the next 18 hours, Maya worked alongside his unit. By the end, 3 of his medics had quietly commented on her steadiness under pressure. Before his unit departed, Captain Whitfield pulled her aside. "You're going to be remarkable," he said quietly. "Whatever you choose to do, don't let anyone talk you out of it." Then he showed her a simple signal, 3 fingers pressed gently to the inner wrist, held for 2 seconds. "If you ever need help and words fail you," he said, "use this. Someone who knows it will find you." She never forgot it, not once in 10 years. 10 years later, Maya's dream had become real, but reality carried a weight she hadn't fully anticipated. After graduating with honors from nursing school, she secured a position at Rock Ridge Medical Center in Denver, Colorado, one of the most prestigious hospitals in the Mountain West region. It was exactly the kind of institution she had worked toward. State-of-the-art facilities, specialized departments, life-saving medicine happening every single day. But Rock Ridge also had a reputation that insiders whispered about. It was ruthless with new staff. The hospital was run by CEO Harrison Caldwell, a sharp businessman who had modernized the institution and grown its revenue by 40% in 6 years. Efficiency was his religion. Protocol was his scripture. Under his leadership, the hospital had climbed every national ranking, but something less measurable had quietly declined: the culture of human care. New nurses were expected to perform at veteran level from day one. Errors triggered formal reviews. Mentorship was rare. Staff were siloed by department, quietly competing rather than collaborating. People burned out and left, only to be replaced by fresh graduates who would eventually burn out too. Maya tried to adapt. She truly did. She arrived early and stayed late. She studied patient charts on her lunch breaks. She swallowed her questions rather than risk appearing incompetent. She told herself this was temporary, that she just needed to prove herself, and then things would ease. But things didn't ease. Her mother, Patricia, had suffered a minor stroke back in Billings. Medical bills were climbing, and Maya was sending money home each month, leaving herself barely enough for rent and groceries in Denver. The long shifts and financial pressure began to show in her face and her frame. She lost weight. Her hands, once so steady, sometimes trembled when exhaustion peaked. Then, one night, a decision she made in a patient crisis, the right decision, the one that saved a child's life, triggered a formal complaint from a supervising physician who had not been present and did not understand the full picture. A disciplinary letter landed in her file. Maya read it at midnight, alone in her apartment, and for the first time in years, she wept. The child's name was Lily Marsh.
She was 7 years old, admitted for routine post-surgery observation following an appendix procedure. Her parents had stepped out briefly to get coffee when Lily began showing signs of a severe reaction triggered by a secondary medication administered 2 hours earlier. Her oxygen levels were falling. Her lips were turning pale. Maya was the first one through the door. The attending physician was 2 floors away. The charge nurse was managing a simultaneous emergency in the ICU. Standing in that room with a small girl whose breathing was becoming shallow and slow, Maya had seconds, not minutes. She made a decision based on her training, her instinct, and every hour she had spent learning and practicing since that gymnasium in Montana a decade ago. She administered the intervention. She stabilized Lily before the physician even arrived on the floor. Lily's mother, returning from the cafeteria, walked in to find her daughter breathing steadily, color returning to her cheeks, and Maya sitting beside her on the edge of the bed, holding her small hand. "She's okay," Maya said softly. "She gave us a little scare, but she's okay." What followed should have been recognition. Instead, the supervising physician, embarrassed that a critical event had unfolded during his absence, filed a complaint citing protocol deviation. The paperwork hadn't been completed in the precise sequence required by hospital policy. Harrison Caldwell signed the disciplinary notice without reviewing the patient outcome. It was process, it was policy, it was efficient. To Maya, it was devastating. She had done everything right by the standard that actually mattered, the child in front of her, and had been penalized for it anyway. What kept her going in the weeks that followed were small, private things. A drawing Lily had colored for her, left at the nurse's station with the words, "Thank you, Maya," written in wobbly crayon letters. A handwritten note from Lily's mother that said simply, "You were there when it mattered most." Maya folded both carefully and kept them in the front pocket of her medical bag. They were in that pocket now, at gate 22. If this story is touching your heart, please take a moment to like, share, or leave a comment. Your support helps these stories of hope reach people who truly need them. The morning at Denver International was supposed to be about one thing: getting her mother to a specialist facility in Chicago for post-stroke rehabilitation assessment. Patricia Reeves, 61 years old, sat in her wheelchair beside her daughter at gate 22, a blanket over her lap despite the terminal warmth, her eyes tired but still full of quiet pride whenever she looked at Maya. "Stop worrying," Patricia said, reaching up to pat her daughter's hand. "You're going to raise my blood pressure just standing there like that." Maya laughed, a small, exhausted sound, and bent to kiss her mother's forehead. She had not planned to scan the crowd. She was not looking for anything, but the human brain notices familiar patterns even before the conscious mind catches up. Something in the posture, something in the stillness, the way he stood slightly apart from the noise around him, fully present in it but untouched by it. She looked up. He had more silver at his temples now. The rank on his uniform was higher than she remembered, but the calm was identical. The presence was unmistakable. Captain James Whitfield had become Colonel James Whitfield. Their eyes met for only a moment, and Maya's hand moved before she had time to think. 3 fingers pressed to the inside of her left wrist, held for 2 seconds. The signal he had taught her in a Montana gymnasium a lifetime ago. She watched his posture stiffen, watched recognition move across his face like a quiet wave breaking. He held her gaze for just a beat longer, then gave the smallest, barely perceptible nod. What Maya did not know, could not have known, was that Colonel Whitfield was traveling through Denver for a military ceremony, and that the man sitting 2 rows behind her at that very gate, absorbed in his laptop, was Harrison Caldwell, the same CEO who had signed her disciplinary letter, the same man who ran the hospital where she was one formal review away from losing everything she had sacrificed to build. Sometimes the universe arranges things, and sometimes it arranges them with breathtaking precision. Colonel Whitfield approached Maya quietly.
introduced himself to Patricia with the warmth of someone who understood what mothers meant to their daughters, and in a brief, careful exchange, learned the broad shape of Maya's situation. He did not press. He listened, the way soldiers who have seen real suffering learn to listen, without judgment, without impatience. When she described the incident with Lily Marsh, he asked only one question: what was the child's outcome? She recovered fully, Maya said. She sent me a crayon drawing. Something moved through his expression, something between deep pride and controlled anger. He excused himself gently. What happened next, Maya only pieced together much later. Colonel Whitfield walked calmly to where Harrison Caldwell sat, introduced himself with the ease of a man accustomed to rooms where his presence commanded immediate attention, and sat down. Caldwell, accustomed to being the most important person in any space, instinctively straightened. The colonel did not raise his voice. He never needed to. He described knowing Maya Reeves for over a decade, watching her perform emergency triage in a wildfire disaster zone as a teenager with a borrowed supply kit and no backup. He described in precise and measured terms what she had done for Lily Marsh, the assessment, the decision, the result. He explained clearly what message it sent to exceptional young medical professionals when their institutions punished initiative and rewarded paperwork over outcomes. In the field, Whitfield said quietly, we promote the people who save lives under pressure. We don't write them up for it. Caldwell said nothing. His laptop sat closed in his hands. Then the colonel added one final detail. Lily Marsh was the granddaughter of Robert and Catherine Marsh, the founding family behind the Marsh Community Health Fund, which had donated over $4 million to Rock Ridge Medical Center's low-income patient programs across 8 years. The Marsh family had sent a private letter of gratitude to the hospital, praising a nurse whose name they did not know for saving their granddaughter. That letter was sitting unread in Caldwell's administrative inbox. The CEO's face went completely still. And then, slowly, something shifted behind his eyes, something that looked, for the first time, like genuine reckoning. Maya returned to work the following Monday, expecting nothing to have changed. She was called into Harrison Caldwell's office at 9 in the morning. She sat in the chair across from his desk with her hands folded in her lap, braced for the worst. She had rehearsed composure on the elevator ride up. She had promised herself she would not cry. Caldwell looked at her for a long moment before he spoke. "I owe you an apology," he said. Maya blinked. She had not prepared for that. He told her he had reviewed her case personally, spoken with the nurse who had been in the ICU that night, the resident who arrived after Maya's intervention, and the Marsh family. He had finally read their letter. He had studied her patient feedback scores, her attendance record, her voluntary overtime hours. "I built a system," he said slowly, "that punishes exactly the kind of nurse we should be building this hospital around." The disciplinary notice was formally rescinded. A mentorship structure was created for early career nurses. A confidential reporting system was established so staff could flag unsafe protocols without fear of retaliation. And from a discretionary hospital fund, financial assistance was approved for Patricia Reeves' rehabilitation program in Chicago. Maya left the office and walked directly to the stairwell, where she leaned against the cool wall and pressed both hands over her face, not from sadness, from the overwhelming, unfamiliar weight of finally being seen. Months passed. Patricia completed her rehabilitation and returned home to Billings, stronger than she had been in years. Maya moved into a modest apartment with natural light and a small balcony where she kept a pot of wildflowers by the railing. She began mentoring junior nurses on her ward. She taught them to trust their training when protocol couldn't move as fast as a patient's need. She taught them that compassion was not a soft skill, it was a clinical one, as essential as any instrument in their bag. And one afternoon, she found a handwritten letter in her hospital mailbox. No return address, a Denver postmark. Inside, just one sentence, written in neat, disciplined script. Montana made you. Don't ever let Denver unmake you. She didn't need a signature. She recognized the steady hand instantly. Years passed. Maya Reeves became one of the most respected senior nurses at Rock Ridge Medical Center, and eventually its director of nursing education. In that role, she designed the hospital's first crisis initiative protocol, a set of clear guidelines giving frontline nurses explicit permission to act in a patient's best interest when standard communication chains were too slow. The protocol was studied and adopted by nursing programs across 3 states. On the first day of every new nurse orientation, Maya stood at the front of the room and said something that always quieted the group immediately. You will face a moment in this career when the right thing to do and the safe thing to do will feel like they are in conflict. They usually aren't, but fear will make them feel that way. In that moment, trust what you know. Trust why you are here. The paperwork can wait. The patient cannot. She never mentioned the wildfire. She never mentioned the airport or the signal. She never mentioned Lily Marsh by name. But she kept a small framed drawing on her office desk, a child's crayon art on paper that had yellowed gently with the years, stick figures and a nurse in white, with the words, "Thank you, Maya," scrawled across the top in a 7-year-old's unsteady hand. Every new nurse who sat across from her desk noticed it. Some asked about it. "A little girl who reminded me why I started," Maya would say, with a small and private smile. And that was always enough. Harrison Caldwell retired 3 years later, having implemented more staff-centered reforms in his final term than in all his previous years combined. At his retirement dinner, he said that a single conversation at an airport gate was the moment he finally understood the difference between running a hospital and leading one. People in the room assumed it was a metaphor. It wasn't. Colonel James Whitfield received his 2nd star and continued to serve. He never spoke publicly about what happened at Gate 22. But in a small notebook he kept in his breast pocket, beside folded photographs of his family, there was a piece of paper with 3 quiet words written on it. She made it. That was all. Because sometimes the people who believed in us before we believed in ourselves are the ones who change everything. There is something profound about the idea that a single gesture, 3 fingers pressed silently to a wrist, can set in motion a chain of events that restores a career, reforms a hospital, and reminds a powerful man of what truly matters. Maya didn't walk into that airport with a plan. She was exhausted and frightened, pushing through life the way she always had, quietly, stubbornly, because giving up was never something her mother had modeled for her. But someone had once seen her, and he remembered. That is the part of this story that lingers longest, not the miracle of the reconnection, but the ordinary miracle of having been seen in the first place, of someone pausing in the middle of a disaster to notice a teenage girl with steady hands and quiet courage and say, "You are going to be remarkable." We live in a world that moves too fast for that kind of noticing. We pass people in hallways, airports, and waiting rooms, people carrying enormous weight in silence, people who are one moment of genuine recognition away from being able to keep going. You might be that moment for someone today. It doesn't require a uniform or a title or a dramatic airport encounter. It might be a text message, a kind word after a long meeting, stopping to actually ask someone how they are doing and then truly waiting for the real answer. The smallest signals carry the most weight. Maya knows that now. So does Colonel Whitfield,